Welcome to A Little More History with Mrs. Moore. Hi, everybody. Mrs. Moore, welcome back. We last left off talking about the Neolithic Revolution. And when we talked about that, we're talking about that time when men began to organize themselves into communities. Those communities grow larger and larger until finally we have cities that begin to adopt similar culture, and those cultures then become a civilization. And the very first of those civilizations is a place known as Sumer. And so today we're going to talk about Sumer, but there's a phrase that you're going to hear me say quite a bit this year. I say it all the time, and it is that where you live influences how you live. And so as we look at Sumer, we want to look at how the geography is going to impact the choices that they make. Just a simple example, when we talk about living in Texas, when you look at our houses, the majority of those houses are made from brick. Why? Well, because there's a lot of clay in Texas. And so clay makes bricks. It's a natural resource. So we make our houses out of brick. But I come from Boston. And in Boston, our houses are not made out of bricks. Our houses are made out of wood. Why? Because we don't have clay in the soil, but we have a lot of trees. And so we get our wood from the forests that naturally surround our communities. So where we live helped us to make a choice about what materials we were going to use to create houses. Same thing with Sumer. When we look at the geography, some of the choices that they make about how they set up their culture will begin to make more sense. But first, we've got to get to the geography. So I'm going to click myself out here, and we're going to start talking about the geography of Sumer. So we're going to start by saying that geography played a very large part in the formation of Sumerian civilization. The city-state of Sumer, and there are several small city-states that make up this civilization of Sumer, all rested between two rivers in an area of the world known as the Fertile Crescent. So I want you to think for a moment. When you hear the word crescent, what shape do you think of? Okay. Most of us think of crescent rolls at Thanksgiving, right? And so here we have a demonstration of the Fertile Crescent. And if you notice, it goes from this area over here, which is known as the Nile Delta. There was an early civilization that formed here. We've got early civilizations all throughout, and down the bottom over here is where we have the region we're looking at, which is Mesopotamia. And so this Fertile Crescent is an area in this Near East where we find a fertile soil, which enables people to grow crops. And the more crops that you can grow, the larger the population you can sustain. And so Mesopotamia rests in that Fertile Crescent area. Now, Mesopotamia is a region within the Fertile Crescent. So if you look here, we have Mesopotamia. It's in between two rivers, and we're going to talk about those in just a second. So it's a region within the larger Fertile Crescent region, Mesopotamia. Okay, so you can see in green the Fertile Crescent, and you can see circled in red Sumer. Okay, Sumer rested between two rivers that flooded often, but not regularly. You have the Tigris and the Euphrates River. How do we remember which one is which? Well, the tiger is pouncing on the Euphrates. Okay, so the Tigris and the Euphrates River. These rivers have their sources up here in the mountains. And in the winter, as snow would accumulate in the mountains, depending upon the summer, you could have a lot of snow or just a little bit of snow. But in the spring, as that snow melts, it would create floods that would come through this region. Now, sometimes that flooding was beneficial because it would bring new soil from the mountain areas down to enrich that fertile soil. But sometimes those floods were disastrous. But at no point could they predict from year to year whether the flood was going to be a beneficial flood or a disastrous flood, because there was no way to communicate from the mountains down to the river. So it was a very, very difficult and uncertain place to live in. And again, the winter snows would surge down the Zagros Mountains and cover the land in between the two rivers. And so here we can see some of those mountains, and you can see that this river winds its way in a valley between those mountains. If you have a tremendous amount of flooding, all of this land could potentially be underwater. And that would destroy what you see here, these farmers' huts that are living right on top of that river. So farms and cities and families could be destroyed in the blink of an eye. So when these spring floods occurred, they could bring devastation and renewal. And I want you to take a look over here. We took the modern city of Baghdad, and we're taking a look at both its temperature and its rainfall. So you could see here's January, February, March, April, May, June, July, and August. The temperature can get up to 110. Okay. It will only get to, let's see, the minimum temperature is around 65 degrees. Okay. So Baghdad is going to be very hot. It's going to evaporate a lot of the water that comes in with these spring rains. But then we look at the rainfall over here, and you could see that once April is done, May, June, July, August, September, October, no rain. Okay, less than an inch. And so you've got a tremendous amount of rainfall in the beginning, okay, and at the end of the year. Plus, you've got all of those spring rains that come through, and that is going to either flood your area with beneficial dirt so that you can grow new crops. You can have some irrigation ditches to control that flow of water, or the water is going to overflow all of its banks and it's going to destroy everything in its path. So the Sumerians lived with this constant state of fear and this constant uncertainty. It's kind of like chaos, kind of like we've been living through during this first part of COVID. We just don't know what's coming next. And that's how the Sumerians looked at life. They didn't know what was coming next. They had no control over what was coming next, and they just kind of had to accept their fate based on whatever the environmental circumstances were at the time. So a lot of what we see in Sumerian culture is going to come from this uncertainty. We're going to really see that come into play with the politics and with the religion of Sumer. But I want you to remember that learning to control the flow of water would be the main occupation of the Sumerians all throughout their civilization. And if they could find someone who could control that water, they had a really good opportunity of surviving to the next year. And so that control of water is going to be the central theme that's going to come up throughout all of Sumeria. So thanks so much for listening. After this video is through, I'll give you some more information in class on what you should do next. Thank you guys. Have a great day. Bye.